Welcome back to Being the Head. I'm Jacqui.
And I'm Jane.
And before we dive in today, a quick reminder, this briefing is part of our September Readiness series designed to help leaders benchmark their schools and prepare for inspection conversations with confidence under the 2026 EIF framework. If you want to download the full proforma, go to our online store at PayHip, and the link is in the show notes.
Today we're looking at achievement and outcomes. And over the last 2 weeks, we've looked at inclusion as infrastructure and how the planned curriculum translates into lived classroom reality. And today we're looking at impact, whether your pupils are making genuine, sustained progress from their starting points, or if the system is relying on performative data entry to simulate growth.
So let's start with naming the tension, the real progress versus data entry compliance. Let's name the human cost of outcome tracking immediately. School leaders and teachers are drowning in tracking software, colour-coded spreadsheets, and endless predicted data drops. But here is the quiet, exhausting truth. High compliance with internal data tracking does not mean deep long-term learning has occurred in the classroom.
Under the renewed framework, the inspection focus pivots away from inspecting your internal proprietary tracking software. And inspectors are looking at published contextual benchmarks like the DFE Similar Schools model. And more importantly, looking at pupil work on site to see if knowledge is truly sticking in long-term memory.
The silent strain on leaders is a fear that if they don't produce mountains of internal data, they can't prove their impact. But the true coherence means moving away from performance from the camera. It's about asking you whether your lowest achieving disadvantaged pupils and SEND cohorts are producing work that demonstrates genuine depth, or if the low expectations are being masked by low-level task completion.
So let's have a look at 4 areas you and your leadership team should be focusing on.
So number 1, the book look reality check. If we strip away our internal tracking software today and hold a book look of our pupil premium and SEND cohorts, does the quality, depth and independence of their work actively prove strong progress from their starting points? Or are we relying on data entry compliance to tell ourselves a comforting story? So if a child's tracking cell is coloured green, but their book looks shows repeated low-level worksheets with no independent critical thought, that isn't progress, it's administrative cover.
And if we look at contextual outperformance versus national averages, the question you need to reflect on is, how are our subject leaders using the DFE Similar Schools statistical data to critique and refine your curriculum sequence, rather than hiding behind national averages or generic local trends? Comparing your school to a national average that doesn't reflect your demographic context gives you a false comfort or unearned panic. Are you looking at how you perform against your actual statistical peers?
Okay, so question 3, foundational mastery in key transitions. For pupils entering Key Stage 2 or Key Stage 3 who are still struggling with the basic decoding or foundational fluency, what exact non-negotiable classroom adjustments happen daily, outside of isolated catch-up interventions, to ensure that they can access the full, ambitious curriculum? So interventions shouldn't be a holding pen where children miss out on the daily main class teaching. Is your main class environment actively securing foundational mastery?
And your final area to explore is looking at workload as infrastructure for achievement. So ask yourself, what explicit assessment or tracking policy has been removed from your teachers' responsibilities this academic year to ensure that their energy is spent evaluating pupil work and adjusting live instruction rather than inputting numbers into a system? Remember, protecting teacher cognitive capacity directly elevates the quality of pupil feedback and output.
So let's look at pupil triangulation, questions to ask children. When inspectors shadow pupils, they evaluate whether high-quality output is the result of deep, long-term retention or short-term task performance. They will sit alongside children, look at their work across time, and test for retention and agency.
So when you carry out your learning walks, your book looks, use these questions to test authentic achievement across your cohorts. So, to test progress from starting points and retention, perhaps you could use these 2 questions. Can you show me something you worked on early this term that was really difficult at first, and explain how you mastered it? Or, how does your teacher check if you've actually remembered something you learned 6 months ago or last year, rather than just what you did yesterday? If you want to test depth, pride, and independence, especially for SEND and disadvantaged pupils, you could ask, when we look at this piece of work in your book, what part of it required you to think hard and make your own choices rather than just following a template? Or do you feel you're being challenged to do the same high-level work as everyone else in your class? Or do you get given simpler tasks? And to test foundational application across domains. You could ask, how did learning to read or do basic maths back in the early years help you solve this complex problem today? And what would you do, or what do you do when you get stuck on a piece of writing or a problem? And how do you know you're making progress?
Real achievement isn't about performative spikes in test scores driven by the last-minute year group adrenaline. It is a culmination of steady results of a system that protects teachers' headspace and holds high expectations for every single child from their relative starting points.
So stop spending excessive amounts of time feeding tracking software that inspectors won't look at, and switch your focus and time to live quality data. Look at pupils' work, coach your middle leaders, and build sustainable long-term mastery.
And if you want these questions and more, head over to PayHip Store via the link in the show notes to download the complete September Readiness Toolkit pro forma. Connect with us on LinkedIn to join the conversation with other school leaders.
We see you, we hear you. Take care of yourselves, and we'll be back next week to tackle attendance and behaviour.